Right. Welcome back, everyone. Looks like we are ready and set to go for our regular council meeting. We've already done our welcomes and our introductions here at the organizational meeting that was held before this. So I'll go ahead and I will call us to order for the regular council meeting for Monday, October 24th, 2022. I will start the regular council meeting just with a brief notice. As was mentioned with our organizational meeting, we were unable to set the meeting schedule for the following year, as well as appoint the next deputy mayor. And so therefore, as of Section 193 of the Municipal Government Act, stating all councillors must be present at council meeting in which council meeting dates, times, and places are approved. Not all council members were able to be present at tonight's organizational meeting. The mayor has called a special council meeting on November 7th, 2022 at 4:15 p.m. At Town Hall in council chambers to approve the 2022-2023 council meeting schedule and appoint the next deputy mayor. Administration, I presume we will follow all requirements of the MGA in respect to publication and advisement of that meeting?
Yes, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The agenda for the special meeting, the notice will be out forthwith. The agenda will be prepared in advance and circulated as per our regular timing, so I believe the Thursday prior. And we will follow all of our regular agenda requirements.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Town Manager. And just for the public's advisement, that will occur on the evening before our first corporate planning meeting. So that is probably one of the most exciting council meetings you will see all year long. So definitely encourage you to tune in on that evening. Council, we do have an agenda in front of us and on the screen there. Administration, any changes to this agenda this evening?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Town Manager. With that, Councillor Palechko, I'll look to you to the motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Town Council adopt the October 24th, 2022 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will call the question. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the public input session. This is the portion of the meeting that any members of the public can come in and speak to council on any matters that do not appear on the current agenda. Do we have anyone in chambers this evening that would like to address council? Seeing none, we will move on. This evening, we do have one presentation in our presentation and delegations, and again, it is a very important presentation that we do receive every year. We have two fine gentlemen from our local Legion that are here this evening, and to do the Poppy presentation for the 2022 annual Poppy campaign. Gentlemen, if I could have you please come up and give yourselves a little bit of an introduction and speak to council and the public about the Poppy campaign, that would be greatly appreciated.
My name is Andrew Bankovich. I'm the Poppy Chair at the Stony Plain Legion, and I'm pleased to come forward to this meeting and present poppies to the council and everyone else in this chamber. This will be the 101st year of the poppy being used as a symbol of remembrance. And I like to also add that we really truly appreciate the response, the help we get from the town, very much so. And thank you very, very much for that. And I'd like to call people forward to present the poppies.
Sure. Mr. Stover, did you want to do a quick introduction?
I'm Jim Stover, the president of the Stony Plain Legion.
Excellent. Thank you very much for being here this evening, gentlemen. Again, we truly appreciate everything that you do and have done for not only our community, but our country as a whole. And we're very honored to have you here this evening to present the poppies. So without that, council and administration will have join in front and we will all receive our poppies. And we'll do a presentation and a picture with the Legion so that we can help them kick off the annual campaign. So, thank you, gentlemen.
So I'm just going to have everybody shift a little bit this way just to center on the flags. Yeah. That's good, that's good.
Little balance in the back.
They're not used to being in pictures, so it could take a minute. Not gonna, yeah, okay. Miles, can you just step a little bit in closer? Thank you. I think we've got everybody. Everybody looking this way, and I've got one more, don't move. Yeah, blink, everybody, blink. Blink. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Tradition. All right. And gentlemen, when are poppies available for the general public?
Friday.
Starting this Friday. Excellent. Thank you very much. So again, thank you very much for the Royal Canadian Legion, Stony Plain Branch 256 for being here this evening and presenting council and administration with the poppies. Again, gentlemen, we appreciate the services you've had to our community. Thank you so much. And for the general population, please be sure to pick your poppies up at any one of the numerous local facilities that will have those available starting this Friday. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
With that, we are moving along in our agenda to number 5, statutory public hearings, which this evening we have none. And we'll move on to item number 6, adoption of the council minutes. Council minutes were circulated as per normal in our regular council package. And I will look for any questions or comments in regards to the regular council meeting minutes for October 11th, 2022 that were presented. Seeing none, Councillor Anderson, I will ask for a motion to adopt those minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that Town Council approve the October 11th, 2022 regular council meeting minutes as presented here.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. With that, call to question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Council boards and committee meeting minutes. This evening, it appears we only have one set of minutes, and that's for the Meridian Housing Foundation for their regular board meeting on August 25th, 2022. We do not have the representative for that. Oh, actually, we do have the representative who was there for that in chambers this evening. So I'll look to see if there are any questions or comments in relation to those minutes. Councillor Meyer.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just in regards to question 5.3, member at large reappointment, we did have discussions a couple of weeks ago regarding, we know that administration is looking at how boards can be appointed and how we can possibly get more citizens applying to those boards. I'm just curious if you could expand on some of that discussion that was had there. I'd also like to just point out that it looks like Jan was voluntold as he somehow opposed his own appointment in that resolution. But seriously, if there were anything to add to what the policy may be changed to, if you can remember.
Through the chair to Councillor Meyer. So at that meeting, it was a renewal of 1-year term that through the new guidelines that were set out for the Meridian Housing Foundation. And it was discussed around the table numerous times about how we continue to move that forward so that it doesn't have everybody coming off the board at the same time. So this particular individual was on the board for the shortest term, was felt that he would just be reappointed to the board regardless. So why have 10 people apply to it and reappoint somebody? So This now makes it so that everybody can be on a 2 or a 3-year term, which is what it was felt that the indication was that the town was expecting for that board to do. So that's how we moved that forward rather than wasting a bunch of people's time. We reappointed an individual. And the long discussion was basically how we got to that portion of it. So it was nothing that was out of norm.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Answer. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I just have one for the same resolution there. In respect to the appointment, I do see that the member who was being reappointed, as was mentioned by Councillor Meyer, did actually take part in that vote. Is that, maybe this is more to administration, is that common practice for the boards and committees for a member being reappointed to vote for their own reappointment?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for the question. I don't know that I could speak to it specifically in this instance. Is it common practice? I believe, that I don't know that I would say there's anything in contravention of what would, I can't speak to their procedures, so to speak, but Robert's Rules of Order, would still stand to that all members present should vote on all matters before them. I'll stop there, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I don't know that there's much further I could add than that.
Thank you very much. To the council representative who was present at the meeting, was that discussed at all at that particular meeting?
So in reference to that, yes, thank you to the chair. Yes, it was discussed in great depth, but we also felt the same, that it would be prudent that if you're part of a board that you're expected to vote on whatever was put in front of you. So yes, that was the general consensus in the room.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that clarification. Any other questions or comments regarding the minutes? Seeing none, Councillor Meyer for the motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Town Council received the August 25th, 2022 Meridian Housing Foundation minutes for information.
Thank you very much. With that, call to question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Number 8 in our agenda is bylaws. This evening we have none, and so we will move on to our business items. First business item this evening, item 9.1, our third quarter report. Administration.
Thank you, Your Worship, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Might make that one a few times tonight, but a couple brief comments. So again, the third quarter report is in front of council for review and acceptance, and certainly contains a good deal of information, as it typically does, and a bit of a look back into the previous 3 months, essentially, and is written as much for council as it is for the public as well. And I know, after this is adopted by council, I know that our communications does push out some of the numbers and the updates and so on and so forth as part of the communication plan there. The other thing, though, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that I will note, just because I think it's maybe the first one on the list, but you may have noticed a bit of a change to the lead sheets. Again, that was, we did review our previous lead sheets, and to a degree for clarity, to a degree for ease of use on our back end, frankly, and how we go about preparing these and having them sent into the agenda process to bring forward to council. There were some things that were done to speed up our internal processes a little bit. But you will note the strategic alignment key action point there. That's where we would highlight what parts of the strategy are involved or being touched on by the item in front of you. So we kind of did away with the picture logo from the previous versions. The other thing too, just maybe it could go without saying, but I think I'll note it anyway. You'll notice near the end of the lead sheets too, there's a prepared by, reviewed by, and approved by. So you'll notice there's no longer the physical signatures being applied, but I can assure you that they are reviewed by everybody and read and looked through. And maybe Mr. Deputy Mayor is one of those things that I had to get a little bit used to, and that's why I'm talking about it. But I've been signing lead sheets for going on 20 years. So when I was told that there was no more signatures coming or needed, I got past it, and here we are. So I'll stop there. The report is in front of you. We're certainly able to answer any questions council may have.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Town Manager. With that, I will look to council for any questions or comments in regards to the report. Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have two. If I can get everyone just to turn to page 33 of 114. And through you to administration, I'm just looking for some clarity in terms of some of these numbers. On page 33, Mara, it lists number 2, unsightly properties. 31 incidents is the top 3 incidents attended to. And then if we go to page 34, we see on there, sorry, where is it now? Sorry, back to 33. Community standards incidents, 36 long grass weeds, not permitted weeds. And then if we go to finally page 34, community standard violations, 8. So if I am to understand, and I'll just kind of say it, maybe administration correct me if I'm wrong, we had 36 incidents in regards to long grass, or what I would call unsightly properties, resulting in 31 incidences with the accumulation of at least 8 violations there ticketed. Is that, would I be putting those numbers together correctly?
Before that goes to administration, I'll just call in the community standards incidents, there is an unsightly property column with 31. A little bit further down, no long grass and weeds, that does match that. But I will turn that to administration to address the entirety of your question.
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Meyer. Certainly, the 8 violations issued would be the accurate number. Often when we're doing community standards bylaws, there's a time frame of which we do provide to the complaint property with respect to cleaning up that particular property. If they do so in such a time frame of which is reasonable, then we just continue moving on with the file. If not, then either one or two things happen. We bring in a contractor to clean up the property and fines are levied, or a fine is levied because they just simply didn't correct the problem. But typically speaking, we try to work with the property owner to correct the property versus handing the violation. Often with some of these particular files, as you see the majority of them, usually when we go and knock on the door shortly after the complaint is corrected, not often does it go the full legislated requirement in terms of ensuring that the property has the ability to correct itself. The other nuance to this is sometimes it's a rented property and the property owner isn't currently in the community and they're not aware of the fact that the property is in the condition that it is. So we have a due diligence under the legislation to ensure that the person that owns the particular property has the time frame to correct the complaint.
All right, thank you. And if I could just express my appreciation that we do give the public an opportunity to fix their yards before issuing a violation.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer.
And sorry, I did have another question.
Please go ahead.
Sorry. Just in regards to the parking, we go to page 34 again, traffic incidents. We go to parking complaints 59. Now, I've had a number of citizens contact me regarding parking complaints, and I'm just curious if administration could enlighten me in regards to whereabouts, well, if we keep any records parsing whether, what area of the town those parking complaints come from. Are those all across, I mean, obviously they would be all across the town, but maybe they can just expand on that for me in regards to where we're getting our parking complaints from, and if they're on the up or on the down.
Administration.
Again, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Meyer. I would not have the information specific to the 59 incidences that are listed here. I would suggest that you're accurate in terms of that would be across the community, not in one particular location. We do keep files on every individual action that the peace officer would conduct. So in order for me to provide you a proper breakdown, I would have to go back and look at all 59 files and do a little bit of a catalog in terms of if it was downtown or a particular neighborhood, so to speak. So certainly it would require us looking at all 59 files. I don't think our system is robust enough that we can break it out into different parts and sections of the community.
Just a follow-up, if I could. And I appreciate that would require a certain amount of work, so I'm not asking for that. I am just curious if how we would go about identifying a trouble area if we did have one.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Meyer, thank you for the clarification. Typically speaking, if the officers are finding downtown as being a trouble spot, then we would raise that during enforcement meetings, and we would come up with some sort of strategy to mitigate the time or use the time better spent, and likely work with Communications Direct Dev if it's downtown as an example, to try and improve that situation collectively. So our officers their time is spent on other higher priority items. So with that, if we do have a community location as an example where we tend to be in the same neighborhood or at the same location constantly, then the level of enforcement might escalate in terms of, could you please move your vehicle? It might simply be a violation is issued, or perhaps we have to tow a vehicle, or we have another level of enforcement that we might have to start using in order to correct the situation and stop us from going back there a few times. So certainly the officers do speak with each other on a weekly basis. So if a problem is arising, generally speaking, between themselves and the supervisor, they do come up with strategies to try and mitigate that or improve it versus continually going back to the same location time and time again.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, and I'll maybe just supplement that a little bit too, and certainly I would ask the GM to correct me if I may be a little bit off here, but I mean the complaints that are coming in, they would be coming in with an address specifically, or I know sometimes we get like this area, or people don't know the specific address, but I mean I do understand too our CPO logging system. I mean they're very clear on addresses and the dates and times and addresses. So I don't believe at this point like we take those and plot them automatically onto any sort of mapping system. I don't believe, but the data would exist as it's come in probably for years. If we had the opportunity, the time, or capacity, or will, we would be able to graphically plot those to a degree and be able to see whether there's a bunch here, this area of town, and then it moved over here, or what have you, or if it just would look the same. The data would exist, but I don't believe it's plotted at this point into a map. So,
excellent. Thank you very much.
And if I could just add, I'm just to be clear, I'm not asking for that information unless administration felt it was something useful.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer. With that, I will look to the rest of council. Any other questions or comments in regards to the third quarter report? Seeing none, I do have, oh, sorry. I looked that way, I didn't see. We need buttons. Councillor Anderson, please go ahead.
Awesome, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just really quick commentary and then a couple of quick questions, but this is always a highlight for me. I love seeing this report come through chambers, and we're fortunate as council to be a part of some of what's presented here, but the breadth of what our town staff provide to our community always just blows me away. The work that our town staff do to create a community that is active and thriving, yet safe and supported, is phenomenal. And so I love seeing this come through the chamber. So a huge shout out to town staff for all the work that they do. The one that really stood out for me this time, and I think I've seen out and about just a significant amount, is protective services. The rolling barrage came through, and I know for them seeing the level of response from our community. There were to the point of tears to know that that level of support was offered to them. And that was our fire services. We had some RCMP, our peace officers and such were out there as well, but really made a difference to the individuals on that ride. Back to school, again, they were out there, visible and present within our community, making sure that it was a safe place for our kiddos to head back to the classroom. So tremendous appreciation for all the work that they do as well. A couple of quick questions. I'm just going to look at page 36 here. This is specific to some of our field rentals. Awesome to see our numbers going up almost across the board. The one I'm curious about, just looking for a couple of comments, is our diamond rentals were not quite, but pretty close to half this year in this quarter as they were last year. And I'm just wondering if there's a reason that we saw such a drop.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I had that one noted as well.
Your Worship, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, I should say, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Anderson. I will get back to you on that one. I did read this, and that's one of the questions I didn't ask. I apologize for that. So certainly I will ask that question tomorrow morning, and I will fire that back to you guys through an email.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. And one more question, if that's
Go ahead,
okay.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. And so I'm just jumping down to page 45, and specifically on the right column there, looking at investments. We see a drop of a little better than 15% year over year. I understand that we've kind of been in some tough times economically, but I'm just curious, 15% year over year is a considerable drop in terms of our investments there. And I'm wondering, is this a drop in the sense that we've withdrawn some of those investments to pay for town business, or is this strictly a result of the economic state?
Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Anderson. I know we just had our financial trends report and some of our financial updates presented to Council, and I can't recall the specifics with regards to this, but similarly, I can certainly gather the information and provide an accurate answer for all of Council by email as well for clarification, so thank you.
Sure. No, and I appreciate that. I think I just, want to maybe express, if it is due to kind of the economic circumstances, 15% is quite a considerable drop year over year, and would suggest that maybe we need to look at that investment mix. I mean, $6 million, nearly $6 million is a considerable change in a calendar year. So, and that's it for me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. Any other members of council with questions or comments in regards to the quarterly report? Seeing none this time. Making sure we don't miss any again. So Councillor Anderson, thank you very much. You did take one of the questions that I had on my radar as well in regards to the diamond rentals. Which was actually kind of surprising because recognizing some of the other ones, Q3 last year would have been that kind of returning from COVID, just starting things back up. So wasn't surprised to see the uptick in many of our numbers, but that was actually a very surprising one because it seemed like quite a high number in 2021 and then came down significantly to 2022. So I'll be interested to see that from administration. I do have a question for administration in regards to page 32 on our fire calls. So I know we've talked a little bit before in the past about our medical calls and our service with AHS. Again, looking at the numbers here that are presented in the quarterly report, they're very high. Again, 36 out of 164 calls or medical calls are making up 22% of the responses by Stony Plain Fire Department under, I'm presuming, the MFR program. I'm just wondering if administration can speak a little bit to that trend. Are we seeing calls stay relatively stable at this high amount? Is this a drop? Is it a raise? And then secondary to that, just a confirmation that when AHS is dispatching out our fire services, is there any level of compensation that the town receives for responding to those incidents?
Through the Deputy Mayor, certainly I could look back at the numbers through the quarterly reports and just do a little bit of a trend analysis with respect to that. just my memory serving, I think this is probably in line with what we would see each quarter. But certainly would go back and look at those numbers and see if the trend is up or down or static related to those particular numbers. With respect to your second question, we do not receive compensation from EMS. I believe fire departments have had that discussion with EMS for a lengthy amount of time, and at this point there's no compensation unless you're physically under contract with EMS. So City of Spruce Grove, as an example, has an ambulance response contract with AHS, so they do get compensated for that response. With the fire response, which is similar to a lot of communities across Alberta, it's just essentially a mutual aid with Alberta Health Services related to when they require some additional assistance or hands or help with medical calls. They definitely do call us from time to time.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I do raise that because it is a trend and it is a number that stays very high. And I do want to express concern, and I have previously expressed concern with the fact that our fire department, particularly still being a primarily paid-on-call fire department, is having to respond to the level and the volume of calls that we are speaking to in this. This is approximately one call every 3 days over this period of time. Again, it is 22% of the entire responses for the Stony Plain Fire Department that we are seeing here. That 22% is wages that we are paying, it is equipment that we are rolling, it is staffing, etc. And, you know, I am 100% supportive of providing the best first response service that we can to the residents of the town of Stony Plain. However, it is a little concerning as to what level of responsibility of the health portfolio seems to be being downloaded onto not only our fire department, but to many fire departments in this province through the MFR program without any type of compensation, therefore having to have our municipal dollars going into the fire department to cover health, which is a provincial responsibility. So thank you for that. I do have one more question on the same page in regards to the alarm responses. The alarm responses, again, are very high. We know this is a common item to be quite high. Significant difference between town and county. I do know that, I do recall that we did put a bylaw in, can't remember exactly how long ago now, for our alarm responses. I'm just curious if you can provide council with any level of an update as to how effective that bylaw has been in regards to false alarms.
Deputy Mayor, thank you for the question. I can't give you a definitive number. You're right, we do have a false alarm bylaw, which was part of the update to the fire bylaw that I'm going to say 2019, 2020 is sort of the time frame that my memory serves in terms of that bylaw. Definitely it does have provisions in there if we're constantly going back to a particular site. We have the ability to charge under that. So I don't have particular definitive numbers as to how many of those 42 we may have charged a fee back to. That's just simply stating that's how many calls we responded to. So of that, I'm not sure if we charged back for a false alarm under that particular charge, or if 100% of those were brand new or within the tolerance of our bylaw.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Possibly maybe on the next quarterly report, if we could maybe get an update on that bylaw and just see if that has been effective since we've put that in. That would be greatly appreciated, especially if those numbers do continue to remain as high as they are. That ends my questions that I had. I did just want to highlight page 24. 1,007 business licenses in the town of Stony Plain. I think that is absolutely fantastic. That's an incredible number. To have a population of 18,000 and have 1,000 business licenses in there, that is wonderful. And then as well, page 37, our transit ridership. Again, Q3 21 to Q3 2022, we have over doubled our transit ridership again. We know transit is something that starts out slow, but definitely does gain momentum, and starting to hear much more positive feedback, as well as with some of the potential changes coming with the Metro Transit Services Commission. So very happy to see those in there. Any other questions or comments in regards to the quarterly report? Seeing none, I will go to Councillor Loynes for the motion, please.
Town Council accept the 2022 third quarter report for information.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9.2, the Planning Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. Administration, please go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have our planning manager here to present the PUC terms of reference.
Good evening, Council. So as Mr. Newstead indicated, I'm here to present on the Planning Advisory Committee and their updated terms of reference. Our overview has 3 sections: the history and purpose of the committee, the update itself, as well as the terms of reference, and then the next steps. In terms of the history of the committee, it came about from the Municipal Planning Commission in 2019 with its dissolvement. In terms of the roles of the Municipal Planning Commission, it sort of had 2 main functions. One was the subdivision authority for the town. This here transitioned to administration to streamline applications, and more of an advisory role. And this is really where the heart of what the Planning Advisory Committee moved into. It was in 2020 where the terms of reference was first adopted by council. Initially, there was 5 members appointed by council. 3 members had unfortunately left within the first 2 years. Again, this was a series of people moving out, moving into new positions. And then 1 new member has since been appointed in 2022 here. In terms of a little background on the purpose of the committee, it was established to provide community-based input, feedback, and perspectives on planning-related projects and initiatives, and ultimately to create a forum for dialogue in a constructive and informative manner. This ensured that decision makers were able to make an informed decision on key community items with the community's input. In terms of the update itself, within the first year of standing up, administration created a guidebook to help members understand what the purpose and the intent and how to operate and function within the PAC. Council did not bring any resolutions for administration to engage the PAC during the first 2 years. So unfortunately, the PAC only met a few times over its first 2 years. These meetings were generally about operation purposes. The PAC was unable to meet quorum, unfortunately, in part of 2022. We did advertise for positions, and luckily we did get, again, the 3rd member recently, so we did have quorum this year at some point recently. And then, again, just today, there was 1 reappointment and 2 new members. The 5th one right now, one is the individual who joined recently, so there's 4 members currently. We will be reposting that to seek a 5th member soon. In terms of the challenges for the existing terms of reference, there's limited opportunities to engage, lack of clarity around frequency of meetings, topics, and so forth, and the need for council to pass a resolution to convene. And again, these came about from some feedback from the PAC, as well as an administrative review of the first 2 years of its function. In terms of some of opportunities, there's a desire to increase participation and accommodate that on the committee, a desire to promote dialogue about issues, opportunities, and constraints, and a desire for flexibility in terms of method and timing of information sharing. So in terms of the update, it specifies, just wait for it to load here. It specifies the frequency of the meetings to provide opportunities for the PAC to communicate with administration. It enables flexible formats for the PAC meetings to accommodate the needs and availability of members. And again, there's minor text and formatting changes just to improve both clarity and readability. So in terms of the next steps, if council so approves the updated terms of reference, administration would reconvene the PAC to convey the changes, and then would work to update and implement the terms of reference as approved. That sums up my presentation. Thank you. I'm available for any questions.
So thank you very much, Mr. Dibble. Questions or comments from council? Councilor Plechko, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through to administration. So when I read through this, and I've read through it a number of times, because it still makes me wonder how we engage the committee. And one of the things that stands out, and I still didn't see it again in the presentation, is you make reference to council did not make any resolutions for administration to engage the PAC during the first 2-year term. And yet I don't see where that is a recommendation within that report. Is there some place that I've missed that?
Through your worship to Councillor Ploetchko, the original terms of reference or the current terms of reference basically sets forth that administration, when bringing a matter such as, say, a first reading for a bylaw, would recommend to council to make a motion for administration to engage the PAC, or subsequently during that first reading, council could make a resolution for us to engage. It was what I would call a limitation on the first terms of reference or the current terms of reference, in the sense that it was set up to only engage them by council's direction, with the exception of things such as, say, public hearings or open houses, where administration could invite them to a public event. This was originally the intent to make it a very limited scope in terms of its ability to stand and reconvene, which upon the 2 years and talking to the committee members, administration believes we should open up more than it was.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, so I do have a couple of comments. I will say that, I'm much more appreciative of the current terms of reference that's being presented to us tonight than the original. My understanding of the Planning Advisory Committee when it was created was to loosen the reins, we'll call it, and to allow it to be a little bit more flexible, to give citizen input and so on and so forth. But reviewing the original terms of reference, it was very stringent. And I think that was recognized, particularly in losing members for the public, because there was nothing to engage them on. And by the terms and conditions, we couldn't do that. So seeing 3.2.2 from the original policy changed to the 3.2.2.1 on page 54, the general planning concepts and topics of interest to the community at large, I'm very appreciative of that change. I think we have had many topics of interest to the community at large that could have been discussed over the past 2 years, but unfortunately, due to the terms of reference, abiding strictly by them, we were unable to do so. I want to highlight as well that, advisory goes two ways. And knowing that, as the town, we are looking for advisory from these residents on ideas, opportunities that we have going forward. This is also one of those committees that I look at as community champions. And so I'm glad again to see that meetings are now going to be scheduled quarterly rather than ad hoc, because I do believe that it is pertinent that this committee receive presentations just advising them of what is going on in the town, so that they can bring that forward to our residents, so that when conversations are occurring in the town, they are informed citizens who are able to contribute to those conversations and spread the message of the good word of what is going on in the town of Stony Plain to our residents. Things like our permits and statistics, just looking at our quarterly report, seeing what we've seen in there. ASPs and subdivision reviews, even though they might not be new, even just reviewing one ASP a meeting, just to get that education out there, just to bring those documents back to life. And who knows, maybe there's something that they'll identify and point out in those that is something that should be considered and may need to come forward to council for that. Talking about developments, particularly new developments or existing developments and the changes that are going. Even council doesn't necessarily get briefed on when new subdivision applications have come in and are moving forward in the community. And next thing you know, there's a whole bunch of equipment coming in and work going on, and people's heads perk up and they start asking questions. They want to know what's going on. They want to be informed. So I'm very supportive of seeing this come forward this evening the way that it has. I'm very supportive of hearing that you're going to continue to look to fill that 5th seat. Again, full committees are great committees for the town. With that, any other questions, comments from members of council? Perfect. Seeing none, Councillor Ploetchko, can I have the motion for you, please? Wait for it to be up on the screen.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Town Council approved the updated Planning Advisory Committee terms of reference.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Palechko. And I will look to council. Any questions, comments, or items of debate on that motion and on the terms of reference? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda, item 9.3, the town naming policy update. Administration, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor. I'll be passing this over to the planning manager for a short presentation. The naming policy before council is the updates there before council have some updates that are going to help administration provide clarity to council as well as assist in using this policy more effectively into the future. I'll pass this over to our planning manager to provide further context and on the updates proposed.
Good evening again, Council. So again, this is the town naming policy update. So the three portions of this, once it loads, there we go. So again, the purpose of the town naming policy, so just a little bit of information on that, background and rationale for the update, and then we'll end on the next steps. So the town naming policy establishes a coordinated and consistent naming process framework for council and the town's development authority when addressing matters of naming and renaming. So the rationale and background. So most recently, we've had 2 naming requests. The intention here is that in terms of the naming request, we'll be able to address commemorative names and clarify roles and responsibility for assigning commemorative names. This is a topic that was not part of the current or is not part of the current policy. The other item here that there's after this one here is the significant name registry. And again, the original policy set forth the ability to establish the naming registry, but at this point in time, it has not been established. So the second item, or the third item, I guess I'll be talking to you about tonight, is regarding actually establishing this registry. So in terms of the actual changes, again, commemorative names are introduced, and there's a variety of definitions, texts, minor updates that have also been done to this effect. For the next steps here, we've got council approval, implementation of the policy, and then for the 2 specific naming requests that have come forth that I'll touch on more later this evening, administration will be able to use the policy accordingly to process those correctly. Once again, thank you. Any questions or comments, I'm available.
Thank you for that presentation this evening, Mr. Dibble. And I will look to council for any questions or comments regarding the changes to the policy. Councillor Meyer, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This might be a simple question, or probably is. Just on page 79, 5.0 standards, 5.1, names for consideration may be submitted at any time by council, administration, or the public. I'm just looking for clarity there. To whom would we submit those to? And I suspect, and I'll just stop there.
Through your worship to Councillor Meyer, administration would be the answer. Anyone can submit a naming request to administration, and then administration, and again, depending on if it's something that would be decided upon by the development authority or council, would be processed accordingly.
All right, just a follow-up to that question. In regards to when submitting, is there the intention to have some formal form that they would, that applicants would fill out or the like? Or is it just a matter of coming down to town hall and talking to someone in administration?
Again, through your worship to Councillor Meyer, the intention moving forward is that there would be a sort of an application form for naming requests. It is one of the implementation items from the original standing up of the policy that we are working on right now. For the most 2 recent ones, we had a draft sort of thing created to, I guess, process or standardize the process for that. So we're using that kind of as a pilot right now to see how it goes through. And in the future, again, as part of this here, part of that implementation would be to stand up something on the website towards the idea of naming requests and how to actually go about those, utilizing this form.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Pletchko.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Administration, for clarification, you make reference to not having the names the same as Parkland County and Spruce Grove. I'm wondering, when you get into the name specifically, how that is avoided when the town down the road allows names. So how do we not end up with two Chuck Ways?
Through Worship Councillor Pletchko, administratively, we keep very close with both Spruce Grove and Parkland County. So whenever we have a naming application or a new name being assigned to, say, a plaza, roads, and so forth, we refer those to each of the municipalities to ensure that there is no crossover. And if so, we would either refuse it or ask for alterations to make sure there was at least a mitigation, if not a removal of that confusion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Comments? Seeing none, I do just have one question for administration. It's more clarity. I believe I know it, and I'm actually curious as to if it should be mentioned in the policy. You did mention the addition of the commemorative naming in this policy. And my understanding of commemorative naming is if we have 50th Street, we could rename 50th Street under a commemorative name, which would then not require legal address changes for all of the current inhabitants, et cetera, on that road. Is that the correct understanding of that?
That is. Again, it would be an additional name to the existing name. A good example regionally would be White Avenue. So it actually just says in brackets on all of the street names or any of the post sort of signage indicates that White Ave is, again, the commemorative name for that avenue in Edmonton.
Okay. And does administration feel then that it might be worthwhile to somewhat define, maybe I missed it, I did not see the term commemorative. Sorry, actually I do, there we go, intentionally. It doesn't speak to, and this is the point I'm trying, it doesn't speak to how that's applied. It doesn't speak to that it's not actually renamed. And that's where I'm just wanting to ensure that we're avoiding any confusion when it comes to the application of a naming versus a commemorative naming.
I guess the best way to address the question is in terms of how we would implement the policy is more of an administrative function. So this is something that we're working on right now in terms of a procedure or sort of a practice of how we go about this. As mentioned earlier, in terms of some of the information we put on the website regarding sort of an application form for naming requests, this is something that would likely be informed sort of as a Q&A or something like that, or at least if we do get something to that effect, administration would answer it upon request.
Excellent, thank you very much. And then the final question that I have is, are members of the public who are submitting naming requests or requests to be added to the significant names registry, are they able to either specify a specific item, be it a park, road, etc., that they would like that name applied to, or again, to segment it to say, I would like this on a park, not a road, not a building or facility. Is there that level of feedback in the application?
There's two parts to that. One, we haven't had many to try this out. In terms of the draft application we have right now, it's designed to be quite comprehensive and take into account either of those options, for which we would then process that accordingly, get through some probably internal discussions at the administrative level to see what's appropriate. And again, with the next item being the significant name registry, those are sort of things that may be able to be noted in the registry itself.
Excellent, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments in regards to the town naming policy? Seeing none, Councillor Anderson, I will ask for the motion. We'll get that up on the screen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that Town Council approve the town naming policy C C-PI 057 and repeal town naming policy C-PI 043.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. Any other final questions, comments, or debate on the matter? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 9.4 is complementary to the town naming policy update. This is a proposal of significant names registry from administration. Administration, please go ahead with the presentation.
Thank you again, Council. So for the significant names registry, there's a short little succinct presentation here. So again, the significant name registry has been brought forth as set in the town naming policy. Administration has drafted an initial list of significant names, and they're being presented to council for consideration. In addition to this, and as mentioned earlier, there's 2 different requests that the town has received to name specific features after Stony Plain residents. Administration requires council's approval of these names to decide upon the naming requests. And again, the rationale for both of these has been provided and attached for council's consideration. So there's sort of a 2-part to this. Again, council can approve to stand up the significant name registry as drafted. And then there's the 2 additional names in an optional motion that council could add the additional 2 names or either name at their discretion. So again, if the naming registry gets approved, administration would publish this again on the website and then would work to maintain the list going forward as per the town naming policy. Once again, thank you. And any comments, I'm available.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Dibble. Council, any questions, comments in regards to the significant names registry and the additional names that have been proposed? Councillor Meyer.
Thank you. Just for clarification, does it require an additional motion to add the 2 names, or is that implied?
Thank you for the question. Yes, is the answer to that. The additional 2 names would require a separate motion on top of the motions to accept the name registry.
Okay, well, when the time comes, I would know.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just for clarification, can administration define what would be considered significant in order to have somebody's name on the registry? Again, we know the town was built on several very important families, and I'm only seeing certain names on here. And I was just curious as to the potential for either duplications or multiple people with the same name or people not being listed.
Administration.
Through your worship to Councillor Loynes, I would just quickly read the definition in terms of the fact that, I guess, okay, sorry, caught me a little bit here on this one here. In terms of significant, the difficulty I guess I have answering the question is it is significant to the community. So ultimately, anyone, as long as they meet the standards of what a name would, like the person, again, there's those 4 clauses or standards there for what someone would be evaluated for, but it would be up to the community to raise this. So again, this is kind of why the significant name registry rests with council as the community's decision-making body, that they would be brought forth by administration, but it would also be to council's purview whether it would be significant enough for the community to be put on the registry itself. So I don't want to overstep here, but again, we do have the stuff within the standards.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, too, if I can maybe speak to that a bit, I think it's a good question and a fair question in that, you know, just the term significance, unless it's like specifically and clearly defined, can mean different things to different people. And, you know, over the course of my time, you know, we often you know, people will contact us, they'll talk about maybe an ancestor or someone that was important to them and important in many ways to the community, and ask, you know, can can we get that name on a street at some point? Which, you know, as I understand, I don't know that we have a hard, call it what you want, background on when some of these names were submitted or who did them. I'm not sure. I think we probably have some of that, but I don't know that we have all of it. You'll notice that there are a number of former mayors, I believe, on the list. You know, for some, people would say that's significant. For others, they would say maybe not so significant. You know, that's part of the challenge for sure. Again, if I can maybe just take a little bit of time here, Deputy Mayor. Often, I'm sure this council, like everyone else, will watch in the news, you know, different sporting, you know, achievements will sometimes be recognized that way. You know, different achievements in the world outside of sport are often considered significant. And then I would layer on top of that, you know, the changing nature of society can also alter what may or may not be provided on a significant names registry. I would, part of my advice, I guess, on that too to council is that it will always be somewhat difficult to specifically define significance. And some of it will be through applications and reviews and so on, but some of it, I believe, will also always be a bit of council's collective wisdom on anything that would be added to a naming list. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I think I'll stop there and just leave it with council that yes, there's a changing nature of significance, and ultimately, as the manager has indicated, council of the day will be the ones that determine that significance in one way, shape, or form. So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? Seeing no more, I do have a couple myself. In regards to the list that is being presented to us, I'm curious if administration can speak to whether the individuals that have been identified have all provided their approval to be on this list, and of course, if they are no longer with us, if the family of that individual has been consulted for them to be on this list.
No, I guess is a simple answer to that. We've not gone and, say, cross-checked all the names on here. Again, some of them, they have passed. Many have passed in this case. Just for some background and maybe some context that might be beneficial for council to make the decision tonight. The names here, many of which were established based on, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with our former development officer of 25 years with the town. She spent many years being involved and continues to be involved with the community. Her kind of research, I think a lot of these actually came from, I forget the name of the book, it's the Fifth Meridian or something like that. It's a history book that we have in the office here, as well as some work with the Multicultural Center on sort of past inhabitants. Formed a lot of the research for the names here that have been recommended initially. The intention here, again, is to kind of spur some ideas and context in terms of what significant may mean. Not everyone on here is just necessarily an inhabitant from past decades, but more recent in some cases. The intention here is really to kind of start generating an idea or a sense of what this would be. Again, sort of as a reference point. These were the ones administration has reviewed and believe were of merit for council to consider for this registry. Again, if there's any specific questions, I might be able to answer them to some degree. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you. And, you know, I do have a little bit of concern with that answer in that, you know, I do understand historical, and I believe it is prudent to recognize our historical figures of the community. But I also believe it is prudent to respect the individual's choice and the individual's family's choice. I think this is a great list. I think it's a fantastic list. There are some fantastic people on this list. But if that person or that person's family has not provided the town of Stony Plain with acceptance and guidance for their name to be on that list, I do share a little bit of concern with that. I'll leave that to digest for a few minutes and continue on with some of my other questioning. In regards to duplicate names, So as we see of what's being presented tonight, the additional names that are being presented share the same surname. We have the Kulaks, which is already on the list, and the Halls, which is already on the list. Obviously, Glenn Hall, and then for Kulak, I believe it was Jacob, which was the mayor. I'm not sure about family relation. But the name that is stated is only stated as the surname for the significant names registry. And then there's the historical or cultural significant expands it to include that first name. So if we were to adopt adding in the new names, are they adopted as simply surnames if those surnames already exist on the registry?
We have begun thinking about this topic, I guess, in terms of the duplicate names, given that the first version here doesn't have any, but some of the names before you as the alternative recommendation would do that. In essence, the name category, the first column, really is just for organizational purposes and states them by last name, just for easy reference, if you would. In essence, under the historical or cultural significant, that there is where we would have two separate distinct names for each of the individuals or pairs of individuals in the case of some. But again, they would still be ordered to that effect. So you would see, for example, Kulak would appear twice. Hall would appear twice if they were both adopted, with additional information in the other two columns to specify more information about them.
Thank you. And then if you could speak to, once a name is used, just curious as to, obviously we see several names on here that are listed in the registry, have been used in different locations, and then remain on the registry. Can you speak to why it is that once that name has been used, it would remain on the registry?
Again, they still are significant names, I guess, to the community. From an administrative standpoint, things such as Oakway Drive, Oakway Park. It's not to say, most recently, again, we've got Oakway Drive that we just named something Oakway Park. So it still gives us the ability to apply those names to different features that might be relevant from either a site-specific or relational to, again, that individual or some of their activities, or even in something that's been named after them already.
Thank you very much. Look to the rest of council for any further questions or comments. I'm seeing none. So before I ask for a motion, I would just maybe make this suggestion to our administration that the list being presented in front of us, where it is reasonable, I do think it would be prudent of us to contact either those individuals or try to contact members of the family of those individuals to ensure that if this is passed this evening, that they are accepting of that individual's name being on the significant names registry, as well as we mentioned earlier, about some preferences around that. If they would prefer that name not be used for a specific feature or characteristics, or if there was a preferred feature or characteristics that they would like to see that name applied to, that gives them the same opportunity then that anybody who would come forward in the future application process would have. It wouldn't just be a list of names that we have sitting around to choose for whichever we decide. I think those families, if possible, should have that level of input.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, if I may comment on that, yeah, I believe that's a very prudent step, and I am assuming and for sure will make those efforts. And the reason I say that, again, even in my time here, we have had, I would say unofficially names being brought forward, and just because the individuals are around, we've had some conversations and been told no, they aren't comfortable with that at this point in time, or they don't want their name on a road or what have you. So I think it's a good step to take, and I would, again, as going forward, as we try to put a little bit of procedure and a little bit of policy, so to speak, around this, that would be included on applications and so on, have to have some type of a sign-off, so it's not a surprise necessarily. But I would say, again, my own experience, a lot of them do come from family, and see how that goes. Maybe they're aware, maybe they aren't. But I appreciate the dialogue with council. And again, this is something that we're, going from what was more of an informal process and policy to a further formalization, which I think will serve the community well over time, and bring a little bit of clarity to these sorts of requests, because as I'm sure Council's aware, you probably hear some of those comments out on the street, so to speak, too, about how does somebody get something named after them, what does it take, and so on, and so that's trying to go again, just tidying this up, cleaning it up, and making it more usable and more, I guess, transparent to Mr. Deputy Mayor. So
thank you very much, Administration. Final question to Administration, then before I call for a motion on this. Was there any presentation being given on the 2 additional names that are being presented to be added, or is it just the information we have in the council packages as council is to make a decision on that?
The information that is in the package in terms of what was provided by the applicants, so administration thought that it would be fit just to provide that directly. No scrutiny, just as it is, so council can decide appropriately.
Councillor Anderson, question?
Thank you, Mayor. Just listening to the dialogue and your comments and the response from administration, and then looking at the lead sheet that's here. I don't know if this defeats the purpose, but I certainly appreciate the sentiments around, permission for name use and those sorts of things, and appreciate the comments around this being an initiative that we're trying to get going, needs to be cleaned up in some degrees, the possibility of a formal application process, which approval could be a part of that, in terms of what that would look like. Is it possible that the first part of this recommendation is brought forward as a motion tonight in terms of establishing the registry, and that we defer approving the names on the list until that process is hammered out a little bit clearer? There's some expectations around approval and whatnot, without having to come back and reapprove, the entire thing, just bringing those names forward to be put on the registry. So just a question there. I'm not sure who that's to, but just a thought.
Councillor Anderson. And I would actually ask the question of administration. Should the motion as it is presented this evening pass and administration undertakes that work, would administration need to come back to council to remove any names from that list?
Yes, we would need to come to remove any names from the list. Again, the list is added and subtracted by council's decision. In terms of some of the comments made by Councillor Anderson, again, I guess I would just preface any sort of decision on the matter that I guess the way I look at it is kind of the gatekeepers of the names themselves, allowing administration to administer them, is council, and that's why the registry kind of exists. So in essence, administration could have processed these previously, but we chose not to, given the policy itself and the interpretation of the policy that we read through, that we don't have the authority from council to utilize names in this manner until the registry is set up. So really, although some of the, the workings of the procedure still need to be worked out administratively, we feel that we can proceed with that at this point in time if council gives the blessings to the names by allowing them and adopting them within the registry themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Dibble. And I would follow that up with saying that with hearing that they do have to come back if anybody wished to be removed, deferring this either way would result in another motion being required to come to council. Either a motion to bring the list forward with the names as approved by either themselves or the family members, which could also be significantly delayed. If you have issues contacting, we could end up with multiple of these coming forward in order to add all of these names eventually to that registry. Whereas if we approve the list tonight, the only time anything would have to go back is if somebody so chose not to remain on that list. So Councillor Anderson, unless you feel very strongly about number 2, I think council can lay in the confidence of administration that the names would not be applied until such a time as the legwork has been done for the approval from the family themselves. And then that way, it only ever has to come back to council if anybody on that list chooses not to have their names stand. Would that be acceptable to you?
it's one of those ones that you think is going to be easy until you get in here, because I am having a little bit of a tough time approving a list of names knowing that we don't have approval for the names to be on the list. And so, all things considered, and I appreciate the work that may need to be created, for administration. I am in full support of having a significant names registry. I just don't think tonight that I would be able to vote in favor of this list of names, knowing that it has not been approved by the individuals or the families of the individuals that are there. And as you've suggested, either way, it needs to come back to council to add or to remove. And so, I think either way, this is going to come back into us. And I would rather it comes back to us with the approval of these names from the individuals or the family members, as opposed to somebody asking that they don't be on it and now we have to remove them. So I think based on this conversation, that I would move that town council, and I guess, can I make that as a motion now?
So we don't currently have a motion on the floor, so at this point in time, we would not be able to accept.
Sure, so just in terms of the conversation, then I would be in favor of pushing the names registry forward without the names as listed here this evening.
So thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Plechko, I did see your hand. Do you have a question or comment for administration, or would we be better suited that be saved for debate?
I have a question.
Question? Go ahead then, thank you.
So further to Councillor Anderson's questioning, I'm curious as why administration brings these forward and it's not the people that would be bringing this forward. Why does administration dive into specific names of past if we don't have the family members bringing that forward? When I read the two that we have in front of us, the way I read that is this is administration's recommendation to bring significant names forward. And I'm just curious as to why that would be up to administration and not somebody wanting something forward for a family member.
So, thank you, Councillor Plechko. And before I go to administration on that, I believe what we did here is that a majority of the names, or at least some of the names that are on the list being presented today, were brought forward by family members to administration prior to this policy essentially being in place. But I'll turn that over to administration for further comment.
Yeah, you're Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Plechko. I can appreciate the question in that, we do have contact with some of them. I think what we're saying is we can't necessarily say that we have contact with all of them in the past. Again, these were when we kind of looked around, and like I mentioned, even in we get people that phone in or send emails in and say, hey, this should be on a list. And so we've kind of just accumulated them over the course of a number of years. And so although some of them were submitted by family members or individuals, we can't absolutely verify that. As to why, we brought that forward, I don't think this is an administrative list. These are names that have been provided by the public or family members at some point in time. But again, as I think was mentioned earlier, that some point in time literally could have been 25, 30 years ago. And they've just been sort of kept track of or kept record of. And this is an attempt to, one way or the other, I don't want to say legitimize the list, but to put the list as an accepted and understood council approved list of names. So that's sort of where they were coming from. And the last comment I would make is, I had anticipated this would be a bit of a dialogue. These are, these names have come up, they were brought forward, so on. Council, feel good about that, not, all sorts of around. And we're just wanting to try to clean it up so that 5 years from now or 12 years from now, it is much cleaner for whoever's sitting in the room at the time. So,
Thank you very much, Town Manager. Councillor Plaschko, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions or comments before we move into the motion? Seeing none, then we will move into the motion. I will call on Councillor Meyer to make the motion with a reminder that there is the optional addition to that motion in regards to the 2 additional names that were presented this evening. So we'll wait for that motion to be up on the screen. Would you like the optional motion added to that as bullet point 3?
Yes, please.
Administration, is it possible to have item 3 added to that motion for the addition of the optional names, or of the additional 2 names?
Nodding, so I believe so. It might be a minute or two just to get that up there.
We will give administration just a minute for that. And again, during that time, I'll express the appreciation for this list, for our former member of staff to have the foresight to have kept this list, to have developed this list. I think it is prudent, it is very respectful of the members of the community that have contributed significantly to the community as per some of the standards that we see. And then I do appreciate the fact that this is now being formalized and that it is coming forward so that this can be adopted, it can be publicized, and we can ensure that anybody in the community is aware of how names come to be on that list and what names are, I guess, qualifications, if you would call it, are appropriate to have names appear on that list. So we do have the motion with the addition of bullet point 3 on the screen. Councillor Meyer, would you like to make that motion?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Town Council established the Significant Names Registry. 2, approve the names specified in the preliminary list. And 3, add Gerald Chuck Kulak and Doug and Leona Hall to the Significant Names Registry.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer. So at this point in time, then, I will open this up for questions, comments, or debate on the motion as presented. Councillor Anderson, please go ahead.
Sure, and I'm just going to refer back to my previous comments related to this, and I'm not sure the process or what I would need to, to say at this point. But, as I read the motion, certainly in favor of the Significant Names Registry, would suggest that the names that are on this preliminary list, go back for a little bit further dialogue and discussion, maybe some clarity in the process, et cetera. And then as for the third one, I know that it looks like, anyway, to be more recent. Obviously, there was some referrals there. Looks like some family members made those names. But I think as that kind of sits, establishing the registry, I think is the prudent step. And then 2 and 3, I guess, as per council's purview, those can be discussed further. But I'm not sure how we break those 3 things apart at this point.
Sure. So there are a couple of options, Councillor Anderson. Number 1, we could split the motion. So we could vote individually on each item of the motion itself. Number 2, you could make a motion to refer any one of the items in this motion back to administration for further work before that being brought forward to council. You could make an amending motion to simply remove one of those items. And I will look to administration to see if I missed anything on the list of what we can do.
I think that covers it. We can clarify if it's not clear, but I think that covers the different options available for council at this point.
Yep. So Councillor Anderson, if you would like to make any one of those actions, you're certainly open to, and we will accept that, and then we can debate that item individually prior to coming back to the main motion at hand.
No, and I appreciate that. I think, I think separating them individually may be the best option. I know that extends our evening here a little bit, but I think each one that's there deserves its own conversation and vote. And so I guess I would make the motion. Do I make a motion to do that?
Yep.
So we'll make the motion that we debate and vote on these as individual motions as opposed to 3 motions in one.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. I will accept that motion to split these into individual motions. And with that, I will open the floor to any questions, comments, or debate on the amendment. Again, this is just an amendment to split these into 3 individual items rather than voting on them all as one. Seeing none, then, I will call to question all those in favor of the motion to split these 3 items into individual motions. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried 4-1. So now, from a governance perspective, we had the original motion on the floor that has now been amended to 3 different motions. So we will require a motion for each of the 3 then. Excellent. So then we will go to, what was that? That was Jay. Councilor Meyer. Councilor Loynes for item number 1. A motion for item number 1, please.
Town council establishes significant name registry.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councilor Loynes. I'll accept that motion. Any questions, comments, or debate on the motion to establish the significant names registry? Again, this is just item number 1 in the motion above. Seeing no questions, comments, or debate, I will call to question. All those in favor of item number 1? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Councillor Palechko for item number 2, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Town Council approved the names specified in the preliminary list.
Thank you very much, Councillor Palechko. With that, questions, comments, or debate in regards to simply, again, item number 2, the approval of the names specified in the preliminary list. Councillor Anderson, please go ahead. Councillor Anderson, sorry, his microphone's not on. There we go.
Thank you. Just going to defer again to my previous comments on this item. As much as I'd love to see names on this list and the history of what they contribute to our community, until such a time that they can be vetted a little bit further, potentially submitted by community members using a form or a process to be established with the approval of the individual or family of the individual named. I'm not in favor of this motion here this evening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. Questions, comments, or debate? You're pointing at each other. We'll go to Councillor Meyer.
Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you to Councillor Anderson. Is that how that's done?
Yes.
I don't know. Well, I appreciate certainly the sentiment of getting this right and your comments. I would just point out that in terms of recognition throughout the community, a number of these people, I'm not sure if you could say they've already volunteered, but they already are recognized, whether it be in a mural or on a plaque or history, something denoting their history. They already, to a certain degree, names that are already out in the community that I think if they or their families had an exception, we already have heard and known about it. And in terms of the 2 additional names, I think you noted, it seems quite clear that they're submissions on behalf of families. So I think we could assume those names would be, or those individuals would be accepting.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Further question, comment, or debate? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would just like to echo my fellow Councillor Anderson. I agree that even though these people may have some type of recognition already out there, it is important to follow up with family or with the individual themselves, just for clarification as to whether they actually want it out there. Again, yes, we do have these people in murals and things like that, but maybe they don't want their name out there on a street or in a park. Maybe the mural was more than sufficient for them. And I think we need to have clarification from those families that they would like to either move forward or not.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Further question, comment, or debate? Councillor Palechko.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll just echo both those comments. I think it's really important what we're doing here today by establishing this registry. However, I think we need to be cognizant of the people that we want to have established on here and have a process so that those that we haven't got on here will be able to do the same. I think, I read several mayors on here, and I can think of several mayors within our community that have done a fantastic job within our community, and as well as counselors, as well as people that volunteered in our community, without having some kind of formal process that goes along with it and having their name there, because this is something that somebody's going to be able to look up on our webpage and find somewhere along the way. I think it's important to have family members, and I'm pretty sure that there would be very few family members that wouldn't want their significance of what has gone in the community to be on something or recognized for it. But it's just common courtesy is the best way I can say it, to have those people be able to say, yes, we're proud that you're going to do that. And by the way, we're happy that council is doing that for them, rather than them coming back to us and saying, not sure what you did or why you did it, even though we appreciate it. Just the common courtesy of being able to go to the people and having a bit of a discussion. So I don't know that I can support either one of those other two motions tonight. Unless I hear something significant from my other council members that will sway my vote. I will just leave it at that at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Palechko. Any other questions or comments to debate on that? So seeing none at this time, I do have a question for administration. With what is being discussed in regards to potentially either removing this or not having this passed, I'm curious as to if the research is done, if administration does the legwork and is unable to locate a family member or a representative that would be able to speak on behalf for one of the recommended names that appears here, how would that then come forward to be placed on the registry?
Unless it would be directed by administration directly or through a council motion, I don't believe it would be brought to or be added to the registry, or could be brought to the registry. I guess that was one of the concerns, I guess, when administration did review whether or not to populate the list initially or not. One of the concerns was, how do you verify this? Say, for example, if there's multiple relatives, some do, some don't. It becomes a community conversation, which again is one of the reasons why the list was initially kind of generated. This was to kind of, again, stir some of this conversation, which I think has been very well received by administration. And yeah, I think that addresses the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, listening to my colleagues, I think there's many great points that have been made. One of the concerns that I have is seeing this list and a quick count. I think there's approximately 20 or so names on here. This could require administration to come back into these chambers 20 times to have these names added. I don't believe that is a prudent use of administrative times nor council's time to have these potentially come back separately, because they may be able to reach out and get a hold of somebody tomorrow, get the answer that they need. It may take 3 months, 6 months, a year to potentially track down for an approval. So I am in agreement, though, that there is legwork that needs to be done, that before any of these names are to be used, if they have not already been used, because again, remember, some of the names that are on this list are already assigned. So if those names that are already assigned, if this motion is not passed, number 2 is not passed, that actually removes names that we have already used and that are already in our community from the significant names registry. And at some point in time, administration would then be required to come back to council to have those names re-added to the significant names registry. So, if I may, not to complicate matters any further, but I would like to pass the chair to the former deputy mayor, which I believe was Councillor Palechko, if I'm correct.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll take that chair over if you'd like to speak
Thank you, former Deputy Mayor Kolachka. I'd like to make an amending motion to the motion that is currently on the table to approve the names specified in the preliminary list. And I would like that amendment to state that approve the names specified in the preliminary list once reasonable effort has been made to contact the individual or family members of the individual and receipt of their approval. And I'd like to speak to that, if I may, once that's ready.
Be able to put that up.
Mr. Former Deputy Mayor, maybe just I can see our legislative recording secretary is typing away over there, and we'll allow her best effort to get that into the writing. But I believe if I can maybe just comment there. So I believe the intent of the motion, for clarity, is to it would be an approval of the registry and the list and the names that are in there, subject to an effort is made to contact and so on and so forth. And I'll stop there. I think that's what I was hearing.
That is the intent, yes. Okay. Thank you.
We'll just give our secretary a few minutes here to get that up on the board so that everybody can see it, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
It's where we need that bylaw song from Alberta municipalities that we heard. Eh?
We could sing it.
It wasn't there, I can't say as I heard it, so. Thank you. So let's have a quick peek at that. So that's an addition to number 2. Approve the names specified in the preliminary list once reasonable effort has been made to contact the individual or the family of the individual to seek approval. Is that reflective of what you were asking for?
That is reflective, and I'll gladly speak to that.
If you want to go ahead, speak to that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Former Deputy Mayor, what I've heard tonight from Council is the support for the creation of the list and support for, in principle, the members of the list that have been presented, but the desire of Council to ensure that either the individual or potentially families of those individuals are accepting and approving of their names being placed on that list. My intent behind this is to limit the amount that administration would have to potentially come back into chambers on a potentially one of or multiple basis to add names that have already been presented to Council. The only objection that I have heard this evening to any of these names is simply looking for the family's acceptance or the individual's acceptance of those names appearing on this list. The intent of this motion is to allow us to approve this list as presented to us tonight, receiving Council's support with the caveat that administration undertake the work to seek and receive that individual's feedback or that individual's family feedback to have that name stand. Simply put, if the feedback is positive, they would like it to stand, it does not require it to come back into chambers. That name can appear on that list. Vice versa, if that person chooses not to, I believe this would also give the administration the ability to have that name not appear on the list without it having to come back to Council to be removed from that list either. It also allows for the premise, and this is the purpose of the reasonable effort, is that some of these names are very historical. And it is likely that there may not be an opportunity that exists to actually speak to a potential family member. For instance, former Mayor T.J. Hardwick was mayor from 1913 to 1914. I am not sure how administration may be able to contact members of Mr. Hardwick's family. But the reality is the name has been presented before us today, and unless Council has a specific objection to any of the names on this list, I don't feel that it should need to come back to chambers. So with that, your former Deputy Mayor, I believe that this is a good balance point between the opinions that I've heard from our members of Council that allows administration to carry forward with their work, that allows us to ensure that we are receiving that feedback from the family or the individual, if at all applicable, and it keeps it from having to continually come back into council chambers for an approval or a removal of any of the names that are presented here tonight.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll open the floor for comments or discussion. Councillor Loynes.
I don't even know how to address this anymore. So, colleagues, just for clarification, what would be considered, one, reasonable effort, and two, would it not make sense then to say something more along the lines of come quarterly to us with names, so not each time somebody tries to add a name, we can just have like a list of names quarterly instead of every name, whether it's today, tomorrow, or in 3 months from now?
So I'll just make a quick comment and I'll leave the floor open, but that would have been one of my concerns. What is a reasonable effort and who deems a reasonable effort? Should that have to administration? Should that actually have a time frame? 3 months, 6 months, whatever we want to put on there, just so that we have established that reasonable effort.
Yeah, certainly I can maybe speak to that a bit. You know, whether I won't go to whether in a motion or not in a motion or so on and so forth, but I mean, reasonable effort, yeah, I would expect, you know, I mean, our staff would you know, do a little bit of background, who's around us, I think was noted. You know, some of these people, we know there's people living in town right now that have that name and we could probably track down pretty quick. Some of them maybe not. So, you know, as that kind of dialogue was happening, I was like, it was a 3-month thing in my head. I was thinking, you know, if we could spend maybe 3 months checking in, trying to look around, waiting for responses, so on and so forth. You know, I mean, after 3 months of you know, half a dozen reach outs, if nothing comes back, I would deem that, you know, we made an attempt. We could not find anyone. That's what I would, in my mind, would consider a reasonable effort.
So I'll go back to my original question. Would you be opposed to having an actual 3-month or a 6-month as a reasonable effort so that everybody here at the table is on the same page, that administration has done their due diligence and, you know, we've deemed that after 6 months or 3 months they could do something, so.
Yep, Mr. Former Deputy Mayor, I certainly would be amenable to add that after the term was once reasonable effort has been made over a period of 3 months to contact individual or family to seek approval. I'd be more than happy to have that included in there without requiring an amendment.
Councilor Loynes, did you make that friendly amendment?
Doesn't need to, I've accepted it
You
already.
accepted it? Okay, so we'll add,
yeah.
we'll add the 3 months into the
3
reasonable
months in there,
effort.
yeah.
I'll open the floor back up for debate and discussion again. Anybody have further? Councilor Anderson, please.
And current Deputy Mayor for the motion and the amendment of the motion. You know, certainly this is something that is important for our community. And I certainly share the Deputy Mayor's concern for the task that this places on administration in terms of going back to review some of this. But I certainly also appreciate the conversation about, you know, reasonable time and those sorts of things. What I had been considering in listening to the dialogue was, you know, we have reviews of policy all the time. Not that this is a specific policy, but it is a part of a policy. And so, you know, if, you know, maybe this was a once a year thing where, you know, a list of suggested names come into council for debate, you know, that way there's opportunity for administration to vet names that are put forward by the community. I think that, you know, names coming from the community is quite important. You know, this is their community today, and I think it's important that they have a part in that. And the second reason to have it come back into chambers, I think, is it's also a celebration. And the names that end up on this list, you know, whether it's past or present, it's a recognition of a significant contribution. And so having this come back into chambers and having council be able to say, yeah, like we want these names to be on that registry, I think is important as well. And I think the family members that are still with us of some of these names would appreciate that and, you know, be able to celebrate that together in terms of the contributions that they've made or their descendants have made. And so all that, you know, being said, you know, I think based on the conversation here tonight, I would still lean to saying let's take this back to administration as a deferral to revisit it, to bring it back forward with the necessary approvals that we're speaking of. Once that process is in place, so that we can recognize these individuals properly, not just have them ending up on this list without the proper recognition that I believe they deserve.
Other questions? So I think what I'm hearing on the opposite end is we have a motion on the floor, but we're also talking about you wanting this to come back to council on a yearly basis to have those names approved. Is there a way? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that, once we kind of get back to the original motions, that I think there's an opportunity potentially there. Though I don't know, maybe administration would have to speak to whether, that can be added as an amendment to the town naming policy, which has already been approved, so I'm not sure what that would look like. But I do think, doing it right, doing it well, having it part of our established process, bring it into chambers on that, regular basis, not having it as a one-off, taking, kind of those random times, but really being able to celebrate that together as council, as administration, and as a community would be beneficial. And so, I don't know where that all comes in. It doesn't speak necessarily to the motion that's on the floor, but certainly my line of thinking as we discuss this a little bit further tonight. So.
Administration, I'm looking for some guidance on that side of it, because we've kind of got a motion on the floor, but we're also hearing the possibility of another motion that would come forward.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I would suggest, there's a motion on the floor. I think council should deal with that specifically. And then subsequent to that, there's still another motion yet to come. But I would deal with what's in front of you now, as opposed to adding or subtracting or what have you. And then get past that one, take on the next one, take on the next one if one comes, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Would you like to close it all?
No, thank you.
Having seen no further discussion and no close, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carried. I'll pass the chair back over to you, Deputy.
Thank you very much, former Deputy Mayor Pelechko. So just looking to administration, so that was an approval of an amendment to the motion, so we do still require a vote on item number 2 itself, correct? Okay, so the motion that is now on the floor, forgive me, who made that motion originally? Excellent, Councilor. So the motion that is on the floor from Councilor Loynes is now going to be debated and discussed as it has now been amended. So the amended motion is on the screen. So again, I will open it up to any questions or comments or debate. Councilor Loynes.
So as the amendment is there, I agree, as previous conversation and what I had mentioned earlier, that it does need to come back for council, whether it's quarterly or yearly for approval. That way we get a list of names, and as mentioned, we can celebrate those people being put on it, and it's not coming back every week for a name to be added, but a significant number at any given time.
Thank you, Councilor Loynes. So I think at this point in time, it would be prudent to turn to administration. If administration could give us just a little bit of a rundown as to how it is planned. And again, this is a newer policy. Even before it came for these amendments, it was still a newer policy. We understand that this policy will likely evolve and change over time. So I'm just curious if administration can speak to a little bit of the thought behind how it was intended that these names were to be brought forward in the future, and again, to that actual recognition and potential, celebration or commemoration of a name being brought forward and added.
I believe the best way to address this is that we hadn't thought of anything specific. Again, this was intended that as the names came through, that they would be brought to council if they were not on the registry already. Again, I'll also point out to the fact that even if a name is on the registry, applying the name is something that the subdivision authority or sort of the development authority would have to do generally by request by the public. So there's a little level of some layering in there, if you would. With that said, this is something that if we had multiple names within 1 month, we would likely bring those at one point in time. Again, specifying a specific kind of annual or quarterly has not been discussed amongst administration, but it could be established. Again, this would be more how it is as opposed to the policy saying what or who and the roles and responsibilities. So if it is something that council so desires, it is something that administration could set up as a procedural item as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So just to confirm, what I'm hearing then is that because it is not necessarily a matter of policy, that administration can take the feedback that has been provided tonight about how council may like to see this come forward and the recognition surrounding it, and administration can then figure out what the best way to apply that feedback would be going forward. Is that correct?
I would agree, or I would say that's correct. I think the other thing for council to just appreciate too is that for quite some time, this wasn't much of a public dialogue. And going back a few years ago, there was some council level dialogue about it. We should look at something like this, so on and so forth. And, subsequent to that, a little bit of policy change. Now we're here today. So I would anticipate, I guess is one word, but, the likelihood, even just the dialogue tonight, may spur further interest. Again, I would say that just as the conversation has become a bit more public about this process and so on and so forth, I think we did see more interest and more questions about it. And I would expect that to continue. So, we'll have to keep one ear on that side too. And if we are getting a lot more interest or, names coming in, that ramps up, we would be into the chambers to either add them or provide updates and so on and so forth. I'll stop there, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I appreciate the feedback from administration, appreciate the feedback from members of council. I think it's been a great discussion. I'm getting back to the motion at hand. So we do have the motion on the floor to approve the names specified in the preliminary list once reasonable effort has been made to contact the individual or the family of the individual over a 3-month period to seek approval. So I will look to council for any further questions, comments, or matters of debate on that motion. Councillor Anderson?
I think my thoughts are very public at this point, but just touching on what the town manager just spoke to in terms of interest from the public, I do think we have a great opportunity here to open up this dialogue with our public, and whether that's through a social media campaign or otherwise, to ask the public to put names forward based on what they see as being contributing or founding members to this community. And so that being said, I would still, be in favor of deferring this and having having administration bring this back to council after further consultation and a little bit more work on the approval side and whatnot. So, thank you.
So, Councillor Anderson, just for clarity, are you making a motion to defer this back to administration, or are you have it how it stands tonight? However, you will vote.
So maybe help me understand process. So if this passes, it passes. If it does not pass, it's dead in the water without a deferral. Is that kind of what the process would be? Like, we're establishing the list, right? We've already approved the significant names registry. So obviously we do want to see this, come back. I think my stance is just that it would come back into council, a way to celebrate these individuals together with them, their families otherwise, as opposed to administration just being able to add them onto the list within that or after that 3-month period. So just bringing more transparency and opportunity to the process.
So thank you, Councillor Anderson. So yes, if this moves forward the way it is tonight and it is defeated, that does not provide direction to administration. So administration would likely continue some level of work, but it would not necessarily provide direction. So if your direction is that you would like it deferred back to administration for some additional work, I would suggest that that would be an appropriate motion for you to make at this point in time.
Okay, all right. Well, then I will make the motion that we amend the motion, defer, sorry. Can we defer it as it's written, or does it need to be amended? Because if it's
So you'd just be deferring this motion back to administration?
and they would bring it back at a later
And then they
date.
would bring it
All right.
back at a later date and time, depending on the guidelines that were placed around the
Sure.
deferral.
Okay, thank you. So based on the discussion tonight, the discussion as council, the discussion with administration, with administration taking into consideration the comments of council this evening related to approvals, process for nomination, et cetera, I would ask or make the motion that we defer this to a later council meeting.
So administration, I'll just look to you again. The intent is to defer this back to administration for additional legwork to gain the approvals, as well as to bring forward an appropriate presentation model, if I'm understanding correctly, Councillor?
I think so, yeah, absolutely.
Is that appropriate?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for the opportunity to comment. I think I'm honestly trying to just keep going here. So when referrals are made or refer back to administration, not necessarily, but typically there's some, either a deadline or a date, that could be Q2 or what have you. But they also typically have something fairly clearly attached as to what is expected. And so in this instance, and I don't want to put words in, I'll maybe paraphrase, like it sounds as though Councillor Anderson is maybe just wanting to ensure that those people are contacted for sure. But again, I don't want to put words in mouth, but the generally a referral will have a specific action asked for. Otherwise, it's a postponement, which is just simply, we're not talking about this now, we'll talk about it in 3 months. And I don't think that's the case here. So I'll leave that advice at that point. And
yeah. So, and again, Councillor Anderson, if I'm understanding, these specifics were to refer this back to administration for the approval of the family or the individual, as appears in the amendment, and then additionally to be brought back forward with a process for how members are to be added through council, including a recognition component.
Sure. So I'll tell you my intent, and then how we word that, please, help me with that. Couple of things. Number one, I appreciate the work that administration's done in forming this list, but I do think engaging the community and our residents in this process would be a great opportunity for us to hear what they value, who they value, and that history. So I think that's part one. And then, the second part absolutely would be to have some sort of firmed up process in terms of how people or how community members can bring names forward for addition to the list. And then, if this is the list, that we have before us, and as we've heard, some of those have been brought forward by community members, et cetera, go through that process, the process that is to be established. We've heard that this evening, that, it's being established, but has some work to do. Once that's finalized, then it comes back as kind of the initial list, if you will. And so I know there's a lot kind of captured in that, but I think community engagement, and permission from the names that are coming forward are my priorities here.
So, Councillor Anderson, I would suggest that those are two very different things. I think in regards to the public engagement and community engagement, I think that is something that can be under consideration of administration outside of the referral of this motion. This motion is specifically dealing with a list that has been presented to us today. Additional members of that to be added to that registry can be procured from the public at large through various public participations. You mentioned social media campaigns, etc. I would be hesitant to have that included in this referral motion, because the referral motion is specific to what is in front of us here today. So your motion to refer, I would suggest, should deal with the specifics of what is here before us today, and any specific actions you'd like taken in regards to the list as presented today. Administration, comments? Is that a fair assertion?
Yeah, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I believe that, is summed up. I would agree to the comment that, to have public engagement as part of a referral could be difficult in that, to what level and so on and so forth. And sorry, Mr. Deputy Mayor, but I'm just trying to keep my head going on this. Like that would be a bit of a challenge to further define. We could try to do that, but I would hesitate to not do enough or do too much, I guess, is part of what I'm kind of in my mind at this point in time. If I may offer some advice, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and at risk of getting a little bit too far on the side, but the motion as it's written could be stood alone as if it passes, then the majority of council sees that. If that's not what council wants, it would be defeated, and then there would be motions subsequent to that. I think for clarity too, if I can just add, so at this point in time, there is, with the passing of the first motion, there is such thing as a significant names registry. It has nobody's name on it at this point in time, but it does exist. The results of this second motion, I guess I'll call it, is one thing, but there's still to deal with the third, which is now adding individuals to the list. And I think I anticipated that this would be a bit of a, there's a lot going on with this particular one, and I would ask, we're hearing a lot, administration's understanding the concerns and the questions. We would either prefer a clear, specific direction. That part of that referral can ask for an update as to what would be done on public engagement. That's an option that at least allows us the opportunity to go back and say, here's like level A, level B, level C, or something. But to get into the specifics of that would be pretty difficult here in the chambers. I'm going to stop there just in case that helps with some general thought or general understanding.
So thank you, Mr. Town Manager. And just before I see Councillor Palechko, before I go to you, I'd just like to go to Councillor Anderson to see if we can clarify and firm up the motion so that the motion itself can then be adequately discussed and debated by council.
I'm not sure how to word this, I guess, is where I'm sitting. So, as it's written,
so if I may, Councillor Anderson, administration, would it be worthwhile to take a, say, 10-minute recess and maybe have Councillor Anderson confer with a member of administration for assistance on how to write that up? Would that be appropriate?
Yep. That certainly works.
Okay, so Councillor Anderson, if you're okay with that, I think that's appropriate at this point in time. We'll take approximately a 10-minute recess, and we'll allow you that opportunity to solidify that so that we can have it in front of council, and then council can appropriately discuss and debate that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. We're in recess until 7:35. Excellent. Welcome back. Thank you very much, everybody, for that. So just to kind of update where we're at, and I will look to Councillor Anderson to confirm. At this time, we have the motion on the floor, which is the amended motion, which was number 2. Councillor Anderson, I believe at this time you are okay with the motion as it is, and in consideration as to how this moves forward, you may have something that you wish to add after we discuss item number 3 as its individual.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. That's correct. I think the best process here is to vote on what's before us. Purview of council to approve it as it is. If it is defeated, coming out the other side of motions 2 and 3 that are already on the floor, I may have something additional to bring forward at that time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. So just as a reminder, Council, the motion that is on the screen is the motion that we have before us. It is that Town Council approve the names specified in the preliminary list once reasonable effort has been made to contact the individual or family of the individual over a period of 3 months to seek approval. That is the motion on the floor. I will open it back up to any questions, comments, or debate on that motion. Councillor Plechko, please go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I think this is a good motion on the floor. It speaks to a number of things. It speaks to a term that we talk about for people getting approval so that we're seeking what needs to be on their list. It's getting us the list that we've now approved above. I think the only thing that it may not speak to is how we see this back in council. So overall, I think this is a good motion that moves us forward to getting us to the place that we need and addresses most of what I've heard on council.
Excellent, thank you. And I'll just follow up with a question to administration then. Given this motion in the period of 3 months that has been applied to it, will administration correspond with council in some way, shape, or form after the 3-month period has expired to apprise council of the work that was done and where we stand on the significant names registry?
Your Worship, through Deputy Mayor, the 3-month timeline would put us into January. That would cause us to have to rush some conversations. We probably could make that timeline work and bring it forward in Q1. It would really be up to how well we can get a hold of people through the list and then discussing it with them. It would be something that we would make every effort if that's council's desire to make it within that 3-month window. But it could be tight given that we're getting into some more holiday seasons.
So I guess just for clarity then, while this does speak to a 3-month window, the question was the reporting back to council. So whether that is or isn't completed in the 3-month window, I think what I'm hearing from you is that you'd be comfortable by the end of Q1 that you would be following back up with council in regards to the results of the inquiries?
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. And Town Manager, I'll just look to you or to our legislative services. Do we need to change any wording in this motion to allow that to happen?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Typically, in the past, we haven't, gone that specific. But certainly just judging from the level of dialogue and the interest or debate on the topic, 3 months-ish would be a reporting timeline, and then at some point moving forward annually. As the policy is written, if we wanted to add somebody, it has to come to council. But given this is, again, I would say relatively new for this community, at least in policy and procedural basis, I would expect probably over the course, frankly, over the next 24 months, there'll be a couple different check-ins on it, whether we come in with them or, frankly, council is hearing more from the community and wants to talk more about it would probably be what I would foresee.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Town Manager. So I am hearing that administration will be coming back to council with an update on not only their efforts in regards to the list that we have in front of us today, but also potentially with some additional feedback as they undertake the feedback that council has provided tonight. Any other questions, comments, or items of debate on this particular motion? Seeing none, I will be supporting the motion as it is written. I do think it takes into account a significant amount of the feedback that was given tonight. I think it's important to recognize as we move through this process that it is going to be hard to get it perfect. And while we all have the best intentions and we would love to see things perfect in the first blush, every time we review something, every time we go through something, every time we undertake something, we will always learn a better way to do it. We will always learn what works and what hasn't worked. I think what we've seen here tonight in relation to this policy and this motion in particular is an improvement. I think we have moved it forward. I think there are things that may make it better, they may not. And I would be interested in hearing administration's feedback when they do come back to us near the end of Q1 as to the success rate that they've had on this specific list. In relation to moving forward, again, that's a different part of this, but I do just want to state that, I do believe there is work to be done on how future names are brought forward, how future names are presented, and how that communication with both the community and the individuals does occur. So with that then, again, it is just on the amended motion as you see on the screen. I will call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? That carries 4-1. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 3, or motion number 3 of these motions. Councillor Palechko for this motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Town Council had Gerald Chuck Kulak and Doug and Leona Hall to the Significant Names Registry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Palechko, for that motion. I will open that up. Would you like to make any comments to begin?
Not at this time.
Excellent, thank you. Questions, comments, matters of debate from any other members of council? Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Whilst I can't speak to Gerald Kulak, I would just throw in my personal experiences with Doug and Leona Hall. We're long-term neighbors and very influential in my life and many people in the neighborhood. They left a positive impact on this community, and I think they're two deserving members for sure.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer. Councillor Lawrence.
Just for clarification, can administration tell us if it was the families that put it forward or it was administration that put these names forward?
Your worship, the Councillor Loynes, I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat that, please?
Was it administration who put these 2 names forward, or was it the families that put these 2 names forward?
In terms of Gerald Chuck Kulak, an individual with the name Kulak at their name, or at the end of the name, was the individual who brought that forward. Doug and Leona Hall was brought forward by someone who was not a family member.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll actually just follow that up in relation to the Doug and Leona Hall. The person who brought it forward, do you know, was there any level of consultation with the family to Councillor Meyer?
I'll just end the mystery. I was instrumental in bringing this name forward, although the letter itself was written by the family, so they're quite okay with this.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer. Appreciate your involvement in that and ensuring that the family was involved in that as well. With that, any other questions, comments, matter of debate on this motion? So seeing none, then call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. So those are the 3 individual motions. Before we move on, I'll just look, Councillor Anderson, was there anything else today? Anything else? Excellent. So I just want to close that item just by recognizing that there's a significant amount of feedback and information that's been provided to administration this evening on this matter. I think it's all very positive. This is a very positive thing that we're discussing this evening, and I think Council has done a very good job of being prudent on that and recognizing that we have many important people in our community, some that appear on a list in front of us today, some that don't appear on a list, and we're looking forward to the opportunity to not only advise our community at large of this registry that we now have created this evening and the opportunity to be involved in that and engaging our residents in bringing forward recommendations, as well as having our administration keep council apprised of that and coming up with a good way for us to help recognize and give an opportunity for those who are put forward to actually receive that recommendation and that recognition. So appreciate the dialogue around that this evening. So with that, that ends off of our business items for this evening, and I will move forward into our council discussion. Councillor Loynes, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Only thing I'd like to add to tonight is we have officially been here as a team for 1 year. So yay us. Everybody survived. And secondly, that Halloween is just around the corner, and I'm wishing all the trick-or-treaters out there a wonderful time, and just a reminder to be safe and for people to keep an eye out.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, I would like to echo some of those words. I think it's been a great learning experience with the 3 new councillors that we have and working with the 3 past councillors. I think we've grown together as a team, and no dumb question is a dumb question. I think it's very important that at this table we're always allowed to ask the questions that are needed. I think that's what makes this council stronger and our community stronger, is by the questions that we ask. So kudos to each and every one of us. I appreciate administration from all aspects of it for the questions that we ask and some of the puzzled looks that we get when we ask them. I know that we all mean well, and we always get the answers that we need from administration. So I appreciate that as well. A couple of other things. I'm just wondering if somebody can update us on the speaker system in this chamber councils, as it is not any better tonight than it has been in the past. Are we getting closer to having something that we can actually hear so that we're not having to read lips from this table?
Your Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Plechko, we are finalizing a vendor, and I should be able to provide an update in terms of the timing of the adjustment to the speaker and sound system in the council chambers once we have a vendor in place.
Thank you. And one last thing, if I may. I'm just wondering, this past week we've had a little bit of trouble within our community, prompting, I think most of us have had several calls on, and I'm wondering how or where our local residents would find a 24-hour emergency line that they could call and actually have somebody answer.
I believe the question is just along the lines of what tends to be either utility calls or emergency type calls. So, and I would say emergency, not talking 911 emergency.
No.
Yeah. So as I understand, although I may need some help from some of my general managers across the table, you know, we do have on-call systems. We do have numbers that are made public for those sorts of occurrences, whether it's a water main break or what have you. And I think I'll just refer it over to maybe our general manager, one of our community protective services, or our planning and infrastructure on any sort of call volumes or 24-hour calls or so on, as to what we have in place right now.
Thank you, Town Manager. Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Plechko. On the website, there is an emergency after-hours on-call Public Works number available. That does go to some of our on-call staff that we do keep available. There are different phone numbers on the website for the public to access, depending on the nature and inquiry of your call, given that the nature of the call may vary. But there is one emergency phone number that I just pulled up here from Public Works under the Public Works dropdown.
So when I go to our website and I type in emergency call, I can't tell you how many numbers and how many pages I get. Is there a possibility that we can narrow that down so that we have the town individuals that need something that becomes a one call that we all know, whether it's an 800 number or a 587 something number, that they get somebody that answers it, that can direct that call to the appropriate person? I've had many people, it's probably the most calls I've ever had in the 5 years of being on council with this water problem that we had in town. Literally everybody saying, can't find a number. Any number we've called, we don't get an answer. So I'm just wondering if we can make that simpler for our residents, rather than having 5 pages, and I guess there's more. I quit looking after I couldn't find it myself. So I did reach out. I was very fortunate. I was able to reach out to the town manager, which I'm very thankful for, which I got a response from. So I appreciate that, Tom. Our residents appreciated it. But I also know there was things being done in the back. So if there's any way that we can simplify this for our residents on a one-stop call, that they can be directed to an individual, I think would help a lot of that situation from time to time. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit. I appreciate that, and I think, we can take a look at, whether it's what's posted or some of the back house procedures and processes. I certainly can't promise council right now that something's going to change in 2 weeks or frankly 2 months, but, we can take a look at that. And I think one of the part of our communications or so on, and I'll presume that we're speaking of, we had a water pressure loss last night, certainly affected a lot of people for, depending who you ask, say a reasonably short period of time, but certainly was widespread. And, that can drive up call volumes pretty fast. And I know, and I may just ask our general manager to maybe provide a bit further comment subsequent to this, but I think one of the things that's important for the public to understand is that although to have them reaching out or trying to contact the town to say something's up or something's going on or whatever, certainly that's good citizenship, and that's something we would want to encourage or to have continue. But I think it's also important to understand, like the water, sanitary, those sorts of incidents are, we are aware of them almost as they happen. And again, although I wouldn't expect certainly, our citizenship to know that or understand that all of the time, but that's, how I do know our internal systems, and as soon as something power goes out or whatever, there's IT that kicks in, and people are made aware, and our call outs happen and all that sort of stuff. So I'll stop there. If council wishes, I was wanting to ensure that we had an opportunity to just at least verbally speak to the incident from last night, and I'd ask our general manager to do that at this time. So.
Thank you, Town Manager. To fall in line with the Town Manager's lead-in with the problem, just to summarize the problem, on October 23rd at approximately 5:30, there was a brief outage that occurred in the town. The power outage affected much of the town, including Meridian Reservoir. This caused a pressure drop through the entire town system, and it was noticed by many residents. The town's water network infrastructure has a type of IT communication system that the town manager does allude to. This relays issues to our operators and to our on-call service at the event of a problem. Now, this happens through 24/7. If there is an issue with a pump, a breaker, or a power outage, as it were, then the system does relay that code to the appropriate people. Depending on the nature of the issue, just broadly speaking, certain systems do engage to compensate for that. In this case, the system created a notification for power loss, which was received from our on-call and our utility supervisor during the issue. Part of this system is to kick in the backup pumps, so as to maintain the water level of service throughout the town. What happened at Meridian is that these pumps did engage. However, there was an issue with one of the valves where the pump could not push through that. It did require the utilities call-out crew to go investigate. So the High Park system did engage and it did move forward. So that's why there was still pressure in the system. When the utilities team did arrive at Meridian shortly after notification was received, they located the problem, addressed it, and within an hour, the pumps were up to full strength again. That was shortly after the full power was restored within the building. There was an important question that came through council last night that I just wanted to address, is whether the water quality has been affected by this low pressure event. Staff during and after the event have been coordinating with Alberta Environment and Parks and AHS on this issue. And at this current time, there is no plan for boil water advisory, and the water is currently safe for resident consumption. As of tonight, there has been no found issues or evidence of issues within the system that would include large air pockets or risk of contamination to the system. Staff have taken additional water samples and sent them off for testing, and if there are any issues that come from that testing, some additional flushing by the utilities team may be required. As of today, the utilities team has not received any calls or complaints directly to them about any water quality issues. And we are working with our communications team on any sort of push updates that we can for the community if they should come up. In short, the town did suffer a power outage external to the town's doing. That it did affect the Meridian Reservoir. While the emergency pump at Meridian did engage, a system error prevented the full operation, but the utilities team was able to address it in short order. This is how the system is supposed to work. We got notified. The backup systems attempted to move on, and as part of the system, the call-up person did go out to verify if there were any issues, in which they addressed in short order. Staff are still collecting information to ensure that any future issues like this could be mitigated, including the issue with the valve as noted. And we are taking a time to make sure that we're doing lessons learned and passing these forward and make sure that that if we experience another brownout, that this is not repeated.
Councilor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that, and I'm sure all the residents did. And we did get a response back fairly quickly, but I know that us as council, I seen a number of texts coming through, so I know everybody was getting that. I'm just wondering if maybe another recommendation might be when we do have a disaster that's going on, and not that this was a big one, but it seemed to attract a lot of people within the community. If you can let us know that somebody's already on it, it's an easy answer to, rather than having to reach out to Tom and a ton of other people. If it's just an email that comes out quickly that, we've got the power out and the water's down and we're working on it, right? So just maybe a slight suggestion that would help us dealing with our residents.
Yeah, I would appreciate the chance to make a quick comment on that, because I think it is we do hear that. We hear that from council. We hear that from the public too. And, and I'll speak maybe just a bit, from past experience and so on. One of the things I know, because if something's going sideways like that, frankly, I'll be in contact with whether it's the GM or some of the management staff and that sort of thing. One of the things I've noticed in my time is that they will, it doesn't take them long to determine if this is a reasonably quick thing to look after or if it's much larger. And usually when we hear from the operations side that it's a much larger type thing, that's when the enhanced communications processes will kick in. Then comms will be involved, and we'll start trying to understand, okay, when we'll be able to provide updates, and what's a reasonable time frame in between that, and that sort of thing kicks in. And then there's like the situation we experienced last night. By the time we get to the staff are already working on it, fixing it, and saying it'll be up, it's likely going to be fine in about 15, 20 minutes, half an hour from now at the most. So there is a point where, well, how many updates can we do between now and then? And I think my own recollection, my own timing of this was probably, it was about a 45-minute from the first thing I heard to when I was told the water is powering back up, So again, this stuff, as the general manager has talked about, anytime we have something like this, we take the time to go through, okay, what happened exactly? When did we do this? When did we do that? And try to get better at it. But that's one of the things I've noticed. I often will be told within 30 minutes that it is a serious thing and we need to kick some stuff into gear, or it's going to be fine in about 15, 20 minutes and off. That's my perspective on it. And when we hear that longer, or it's going to be a pretty big problem, that's when we get the real comms moving in a direction to make sure the updates start going out. So
we're for sure seeing within our community that our community is paying attention to every little thing that's going on, and the minute it happens, they're looking to council for some answers. So it's getting more and more prudent within our community that everybody knows the minute it happens, right? Sometimes before we even know that it's happened and the phone's ringing and you're going, what happened? So again, just communication is a real key thing. So thank you again very much for all that you guys done.
Anything else this evening, Councilor Fletcher? Perfect. Thank you very much. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just echoing a couple of thoughts that have already been shared, but you know, the quick response yesterday, I know people appreciated. By the time I heard coming out of a movie to the time I got home, things were already starting back up. And so as much as there were a lot of questions, I think there was a lot of relief that it was a short-lived issue. So, you know, it's inconvenience for our residents, but also for our public works staff that end up running out there and having to sit there for hours to keep track of things, make sure they're moving forward. So huge shout out to them for their response there. And then to echo Councillor Loyens, it is Halloween next Monday, so staying in groups, flashlights help, staying on the sidewalks, all those good things, but stay safe and have a great Halloween.
Councillor Meyer.
Nothing for me this evening, thank you.
Are you sure? Excellent. Thank you very much. Yes. First, just a quick question to administration. We have our corporate plan meetings coming up on November 7th through 9th if required. I'm just wondering if you can advise council and the general public as to when the corporate plan documents will be sent out for us to begin reviewing.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The corporate plan will be published on the website on Wednesday, and we will be sending out communications notifications through our typical social media channels and through the email notifications as well. And so that will get circulated publicly through those outlets and provide copies electronically to council at that point in time as well for review and consideration in advance of the agenda package being prepared.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I did want to just recognize the new lead sheet. That was something that I definitely noticed. Appreciate that. So we'll see it maybe in a bit of a bigger package. This one didn't have a ton in it, but I think it's good and shows that definitely have some attention being paid to that. Just a quick reminder as well that we do now have the special meeting on 4/15 on November 7th as called by the mayor for the 2022-23 meeting agenda, as well as the deputy mayor appointment. Just a couple other quick things. Again, a huge thank you to the Legion for being here this evening to present us with the poppies and for us to help them kick off the poppy campaign starting this Friday. So just a reminder to our residents to support their campaign whenever possible. Quick update to council that the Edmonton Metro Transit Service Commission this past Thursday did adopt the 2023 business plan elements and also had the initial tabling of the 2023 operating budget. So there's some good information there if you care to take a peek at it. If you have any questions, certainly let me know. We do have the budget will be coming back for final approval. I believe it is on the 17th of November for the Transit Commission. So that is a very exciting development there. Big thank you to Mayor Choi for the opportunity for me to attend the Mid-Cities Mayor's Caucus along with our town manager in Airdrie this past week. There's Mid-Cities Mayor's Caucus that we're part of. It's 24 municipalities representing 33 provincial ridings with 1 million residents represented through it. So it's a fantastic group to be a part of. There was great discussions over the 3 days that we were together about the commonalities and the challenges that we face and some great ways to approach those. So I'd expect a lot more good things coming out of that as Mayor Choi carries forward with that. I'll express as well some big appreciation to our staff for their response in regards to the power and water issue last night. I think from what I understand and talking with residents, I don't believe anybody was more than about 30 minutes without full water pressure there. And my son learned a good lesson of not turning the washing machine on when you do not have water pressure in the house. He's well in tune to that now. Other than that, I'd just like to say a big thank you to our administration, our council for the support this evening. Running the meeting as deputy mayor. It was great, fulsome discussion for council on the items that we had on the agenda tonight. Appreciate the input that everybody provided and the support provided from administration. And that is all I have this evening. So with that, I will declare our meeting adjourned at 8:08. Thank you all very much.